everyone. We've all been watching the news, not only horrible stories out of France and Lebanon and elsewhere, but also the ongoing crisis of refugees flowing out of Syria. And unfortunately, in recent days, we've seen some political demagoguing of that issue that really, unfortunately, is deeply at odds with the facts and how the refugee system in the United States works, as well as being, for me, a reminder of some of the United States' worst moments when we judge people's, whether because of their ethnic background, or their religion, or any other attribute, as representative of some particular political viewpoint that's not necessarily true. And with that in mind, I appreciate the support of my colleagues, and I'm happy to read this into the record. And I'm particularly happy to be doing so with Mayor Mohammed Kharoula, who is himself someone of Syrian background from here in Passaic County, to be with us. Mr. Mayor. So this is a resolution recognizing the Syrian refugee crisis and affirming Passaic County as a place where all are welcome. Whereas the County of Passaic is proud to be one of the most ethnically and religiously diverse counties in the world, where 1 in 4 residents is an immigrant or the child of an immigrant. And whereas the County of Passaic has a rich history of opening its arms and homes to immigrants and to the vulnerable and disadvantaged, and those newcomers have consistently helped build a bright future in the county for their families and all of us. And whereas the conflict in Syria has created the single largest refugee crisis in almost a quarter of a century, with 7 million Syrians displaced by war and more than 4 million refugees fleeing to neighboring countries and beyond. And whereas refugees entering the United States are subject to the highest level of security checks of any category of traveler to our country, resulting in a 14-step intake process that typically takes at least 2 years, including 3 fingerprint screenings, multiple interviews, health screening, and review by the National Counterterrorism Center, the FBI's Terrorist Screening Center, and the Departments of State, Defense, and Homeland Security. And I would point out that all of those checks are part of the existing procedure, not the proposed heightened procedure that passed through the House of Representatives last week. But in fact, it is simply what we do now in the process through which all refugees currently go. And whereas the Constitution of the United States acknowledges the supremacy of federal government power in the field of foreign affairs, including power over immigration, naturalization, and deportation. And whereas the U.S. Refugee Act of 1980 declared it to be the historic policy of the United States to respond to the urgent needs of persons subject to persecution in their homelands, and gave the President the power to respond to an unforeseen emergency refugee situation, such as one involving grave humanitarian concerns. And whereas, although the United States admits only 70,000 refugees per year from a global population of more than 14 million refugees, President Barack Obama has committed to accepting 10,000 Syrian refugees in response to the shocking and tragic displacement of millions of Syrians. And whereas even this modest effort to relieve the suffering of many has been met with political opposition from elected officials and political candidates, including Governor Chris Christie, whose public remarks indicate a misunderstanding of the rigorous refugee screening process already in place and of the cohort of Syrian refugees being admitted to the United States, of whom half are children and only 2% are single men of combat age. And whereas by attempting to refuse Syrian refugees entrance to New Jersey and instructing state agencies not to assist the federal government in relocating Syrian refugees, Governor Christie proposes to violate the U.S. Constitution, which, as a governor and before that as a United States attorney, he swore to uphold. Now therefore be it resolved, in recognition of our common humanity and of the many communities of faith and common interest in Passaic County who would welcome and sponsor Syrian refugees if given the opportunity, Passaic County reaffirms that it is a place where all are welcome and where those fleeing persecution may find safe refuge. And be it further resolved that the County of Passaic urges its departments, local businesses, and charitable organizations to work with those organizations who provide shelter and sustenance to refugee families relocating to Passaic County and integrating into our communities. And be it further resolved that the Clerk of the Board is hereby instructed to convey copies of this resolution to the offices of the President of the United States, the Governor of the State of New Jersey, the 14 members of New Jersey's congressional delegation, and the 20 other freeholder boards in the state of New Jersey.